Okay, welcome to session 2. This session will be focusing on your goal some more, trying to develop a goal that matches the highest criteria from the IB, and really spending the bulk of the time focusing on how to properly select a global context for the goal. So global context you're probably familiar with from lots of your classes, but it is an important part of the personal project. The IB wants you to understandably have a sense of why your project matters in a way that's bigger than just sort of, well, I want to do this for my personal project. How does that connect to some kind of larger theme or larger exploration about the world? If you're not familiar with the global context, so you've got a list of them here. You've got identities and relationships, orientation in space and time, personal and cultural expression, scientific and technical innovation, globalization and sustainability, and fairness and development. And you might notice a lot of overlap over some of these topics, but they do have very subtle changes that they would add to your specific goal. So one of the kind of classic examples from the IB is if you're interested in exploring rap music. If you made it about identity and relationships, you might be asking a very personal question and thinking about why does rap speak to me and how can I sort of communicate that to a larger audience. If you're focusing on orientation in space and time, you might do sort of a history little project and documenting sort of how rap has developed across different cultures. Or you might be looking at just more of a personal and cultural expression, in which case maybe you want to work on your own skills and sort of perform a song for your peers and maybe follow it up with a question and answer session about how you maybe wrote your lyrics and how they reflect a very specific part of your own personal or cultural identity. So there are some significant influences that the global context can have. And that can be really challenging to kind of narrow down. So one of the kind of keys to it is choosing a specific exploration. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. But those big global context ideas like identities and relationships have been divided up nicely by the IB into having several explorations that fit underneath them. And they often help us better understand the global context or which one we're really interested in and pursuing. So as an example, I mentioned identities and relationships, and you can see how there's all these little subheadings. So you don't have to just say, I'm just doing identities and relationships. That's so vague that it might not be very helpful. But if you say, oh, what I'm really pursuing is something that has to do with mental health. Oh, okay, that fits under identities and relationships. Okay, so I'm using the mental health exploration under the global context, identities and relationships. And you'll see in my classroom and in some of the materials I hand out that you'll have a whole list of those explorations under each of the global contexts. So as you go through, you may end up exploring some ideas by looking at how they might impact your initial topic. So here's a sample slide with a sample topic. Maybe you want to pursue the idea of having a healthy diet. Sure, sounds great. And you can see how under each of those, I've chosen a different global context with a specific exploration, and now you can see the impact that has on sort of my personal project path, and there are some big differences. If I choose to explore physical health under the global context, identity and relationships, I might want to do some research about the health benefits of eating vegetarian, and maybe my final product will end up being a cookbook, including health information with recipes that I've developed. If I'm looking more from a globalization, sustainability global context, I might choose the exploration of impact, looking at the impact of decision making on humankind and the environment. And then my research is different now. It's less about the health benefits for people eating vegetarian food, but I might look at whether or not a vegan diet is more environmentally sustainable than a traditional one. And again, my outcome might be an informative presentation to school, different classes maybe or advisories, and I might have follow-up surveys to sort of capture to what extent I've been convincing or to what extent they enjoyed my presentation. And again, you can see the final one here is I might be exploring rights and responsibilities, which falls under the global context of fairness and development. And I might look at conducting an investigation into fundraising efforts to ensure that impoverished communities in Yemen have access to healthy food. And again, my product might be different, and now I'm making a documentary style film. So you can see how you can take your interests that you hopefully developed based on our last session, and now you're able to kind of explore those a bit more deeply and to consider sort of what kind of product or outcome you'd like to make. And you can see how those fit under the global contexts. So ultimately, you need to choose one global context to focus on. And I recommend choosing just one exploration. Now, in your process journal, you might try this out with several first, like I did in that chart on the previous slide, just to kind of get a sense of how they might influence it. And again, the process journal is a great place to explore ideas. Just because it's in there doesn't mean that it's set in stone. So feel free to explore several options, talk to your supervisor, come see me, talk to your parents, and you can kind of maybe get at what's possible, what's doable, and what do you care about the most. And then again, for step 2, after you've kind of done a little bit of exploration, you want to try to explain this. One, because thinking out loud is great. You're kind of talking to yourself, and you're kind of able to, if you're able to provide lots of reasons why you chose this global context and exploration, then it might be a really good match. And if you're really struggling, maybe you're forcing it and it's not the best match, or it's a good sign that if you can't think of anything to say, maybe you need to have a conversation with somebody to try to sort of test your ideas and to kind of give you some feedback before you jump into this step. Ultimately, though, what you want to land on is another entry in your process journal, hopefully one that looks sort of like this. Maybe you want to add a bit more detail, but jot down your topic if you've got one. Write down maybe a kind of a goal that you want to work on. Choose a global context, an exploration that falls within that global context, and then try to justify that. Because again, that justification will be very important now when you're sort of trialing different ideas, but also ultimately in your report, you're going to want to do that. So this has been a short session. Hopefully you've found it helpful. It is a very important one. We're still working on that first criteria, that all-important development of the goal. And it might feel a little bit like this is a lot, and if this gets multiplied by all the different strands in the personal project, this could take us forever. But these first ones are very, very important as they do set up the foundation for the personal project. And you really want to hit the ground running with something you care about, you're passionate about, and that you've also documented well in your process journal so you're not having to go backwards. So again, what we've talked about is exploring the global context, choosing a couple, kind of exploring the implications those have for your topic, examining the explorations beneath those global contexts, ultimately trying to choose a single exploration attached to a single global context that you think best suits your project and what you want to accomplish, and write an entry in your process journal that explains your choices. So you've got these slides to help you, you've got me to help you, you've got supervisors to help you. It's all coming together. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll have another session video coming soon.